Okay, welcome to our webinar on FlipGrid today. For those who don't know me, my name is Mary Kovach from Erie One BOCES Winnierick. And if you have any questions, if you're here for the live session, you can ask a question at the link that you see at the top of the page. So that address you can type into your address bar is goo.gl/slides/zzxcsd. I know the CSD does not stand for a certain school district. It's just coincidentally the code that Google gave me for that particular Q&A. And if you're watching the recording, which is after the fact, there will be a discussion area within the course platform that you can use. Again, if you're not watching live, if you are watching the recording. Okay, so what is FlipGrid? So FlipGrid is a video discussion community for your classroom. So the nice thing about FlipGrid is, especially for students who may be struggling writers who maybe don't feel comfortable necessarily speaking up in class, this offers an alternative where students can have a voice in class and do that through recording videos. So you will need to have devices that would have the ability to record videos. So I have linked on this slide, and you will have access shortly to this presentation as well, if you don't already. I do have the links in here for the apps that you can use. So for example, if you have iPads, you can click on the link for the iOS app. Works then right with the camera on your iPad or iPhone. Same thing for Android. And also there is a link here for the Windows 10 app. So this would not be for Windows Mobile, but this would be for if you have Windows 10 computers. Yes, you could certainly go right online and use FlipGrid that way, because you can use FlipGrid really from any web browser. But there is also through Microsoft the built-in app that can be installed. Which brings me to a great point. Recently, Microsoft actually acquired FlipGrid. So through this, you can sign in actually with either an Office 365 or a Google account, and so can your students. And one of their big priorities is student safety as well. So making sure that any responses that students give will be in a safe environment. So first I'll show you some examples. So this is sort of an open FlipGrid just for some practice that some teachers in different parts of the country, around here, other places, have collaborated on. And this is called What If? Okay, and if you wanted to access that, you should be able to click on the link. If you need to put in a code to access, the code would just be What If? Okay, so you can see this is how FlipGrid would look. So you have some different, what are considered flips in sort of this grid format. So you can see some of these topics: 1 million acts of kindness, sort of what if you were caught in an earthquake. So there are students responding to a question, responding to a video, possibly, or other prompt, by recording their own video, and then even possibly responding to other students with videos as well. Okay, so one of the more recent ones was this hashtag one word 2019. So this is where students had to choose one word that they would like to sort of rule their 2019. One word to keep in mind. So again, you can have instructions for students that are based on text, based on videos, some other prompt you might give them. Okay, so then what happens is once students tap to record, they record their own responses, and then they show up here in sort of a grid format. So for example, if I click on one,
Hello,
it's going to play that student's video.
One word, it's hope. Okay, I have many hopes, which is be happy in my life. I want to live my life and be happy, and I want to study in university. It's an important hope. If I have a good grades, I can find a good job, and if I have a good grades, I want to work in the Royal Air Force of Oman.
So you see that students, depending on the word they chose, kind of describe why they chose that word. So some options that students would have then, they could respond to other students with their own video. They can like videos. So each of these would be a different student response. So this is actually a case where if I go back to our global classroom, where there are some different teachers who are part of this as what are called co-pilots. So we'll also look at some options where you can share a FlipGrid topic beyond just your classroom as well. Okay, so that's an example of what a FlipGrid would look like. Okay, and also if you kind of wanted to get some ideas of different lessons that you could conduct with FlipGrid, really it could be anything that's discussion based, but they give you this area called the DISCO library. So DISCO really standing for discovery, just DISCO kind of has a nice, I guess, fun connotation to it for those who know of DISCO. So then they have some, for example, featured topics. So one example here is a snow day topic. So let's say students had a snow day. Could happen. Looks like we have some snow in the forecast right now in January, if you're watching this in January. So it says here, snow days are great. Tell us as much as you can to describe your snow day. What did you do? Who did you do it with? Describe any unusual things that happened to you or a friend. So in this case, the prompt they gave students also included this video, which I thought was kind of funny. Let's play the whole video. Sorry, let me just skip out of this commercial first here. Okay, so it's actually a principal who recorded his own little parody video about snow day.
This early morning, I got something on my heart. I gotta share. This Kentucky school principal channeled his inner Mariah Carey to make a very important announcement. If you look inside your phone, you don't have to be afraid of what it says. I see streets and roads have shut the city down.
So kind of you get the idea. It could be a hook for students that's comical, but I think this is kind of a good example too, something that can be engaging for students to do to kind of keep them in the mode of listening, speaking, responding while they have a snow day. So for any of these DISCO library topics, if you wanted to use those in your own FlipGrid, once you are signed in, once you sign up for FlipGrid, you would be able to actually make a copy of this and then use it with any of your grids or classes. And since this has been purchased by Microsoft, they actually made what used to be paid features free for any educator, which is really nice. So you could have as many grids as you want, and you have many options for customization that we will look at in the webinar video today. Okay, so I'm just going to close out of here. So then if you wanted to search for more topics, you could filter here by your audience, your subject, your topic goals, or you could search by keyword. So any of these are sort of ready-made topics that you could choose to have as prompts for students. So those are some other ideas. In addition, they have some FlipGrid integration ideas that I've linked here. So this is on their blog, and this area of the blog, their docs, actually has this broken down by subject areas and grade level bands. So far they have the core subjects of ELA, science, social studies, and math, but they're hoping to have more coming soon. So they're hoping to add in soon music and arts, world languages, PD, and phys ed topics. And I have actually used FlipGrid for some other PD that I have done as well. So for example, if I wanted to see some educational integrations for language arts in grades 3 through 5, I can click here. And then it's going to, after kind of going over the basics here of what FlipGrid is and how you can access it, give you some different ideas. So apply phonics and word analysis skills, read text with accuracy and fluency to comprehend literature. And then as you scroll down, they have some examples of those types of activities. So for example, they have here for 3rd grade character advice. So for a book that maybe the class has read or that a student has read, what kind of advice would you give to one of the characters? So that could be one of the options as well. And that brings you out to the disco library. I just kind of like that term. And I also have linked here, and I have this linked right in the module as well, their Educator's Guide to FlipGrid. So again, we're going to go over all the features today in the webinar, but if you prefer to have something that you could print out or look at, you can always click on this Educator's Guide or click on it from our online course platform. And it has some pretty extensive instructions on how to get started with FlipGrid and even to kind of take it beyond to the next level as well. So some resources that you can go back to after today. Okay, so to use FlipGrid, you would go to flipgrid.com and click sign up, it's free. So again, now it's completely free for students and teachers to use. And you can use either a Google account or a Microsoft account, depending on what your district uses. Okay, so I'm going to click here on flipgrid.com. Now, again, I'm already signed up for FlipGrid, but if you're not, in the upper right, you click sign up, it's free. And then you have the option to either sign up with Google or sign up with Microsoft, depending on what platform your school uses. Now, we will look at options too for students who may not use Google or Microsoft Office 365. So if I click where it says students here, students can enter what's called a flip code. So we'll look at, from the student perspective as well, depending on the kind of grid that you create, they may also need to log in with an Office 365 or Google account. But there are options for both students to log in with those accounts or for teachers to create passwords for students on their own. So sometimes younger students who maybe haven't used their Google or Microsoft accounts yet, there are some options for those teachers as well. So I'm going to click on my sign up with Google, and it's going to bring me actually to the account I already have using my Erie One BOCES Google account. Okay, so far you can see that I have some different grids within my account. Okay, so if you're starting from scratch and this is your first time there, what you'd want to do is first click on the blue button that says New Grid. And this is then where you choose the type of grid that you're going to use. So this depends on the background of the students or the age of the students, if they have Google or Microsoft accounts or not. Or there's also an option if you are using this for a PLC or for a public group, let's say a community group, and everyone in there is going to be 16 and over, you do have the ability from there to actually make it so that they don't have to put in a password, or you can just create a general password for everyone to access as well. But again, they take very seriously student privacy, especially for very young students. So from FlipGrid, to create your first grid, you would click on that green plus that says New Grid. And again, this is now where you choose the grid community type. So you're choosing either students are going to use their school email domain, you're going to create a student ID list, so you're putting student names in and creating a simple password, let's say, for each student. Apparently, this version is not acceptable in the European Union, but as far as I know, I mean, United States, obviously, and then Canada, I'm pretty sure as well. Or you can choose to create this as PLC or public grid. Again, I've used this for online courses, so it could be something then that you're using for PLCs within your own building. Okay, so let's say this one, I'm going to choose that student ID list. So especially if I have, students who maybe are in kindergarten, first grade, who maybe have a hard time typing in a longer password or a username, it might be a great option for them. Okay, so you'll create a name for your grid, and then also you'll create what's called a flip code. So this flip code becomes a code for your grid, but also sort of the URL that you would use as well. So for example, if I did a custom code, I put in the word Kovac, then students could get to it by just typing in the address flipgrid.com/Kovac. If you don't choose a code, there will be one generated for you. But you might want to try a custom code that might be easier for students to remember. As long as it's available, you can use it. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my FlipGrid here. So I'll put in my flip name here. Let's say I'll call this Valentine's Day. I'll say I'm setting one up for Valentine's Day. FlipGrid. Okay. So down here, if you don't put in a custom flip code, it will just give you random characters that would be that code. So I could say it must be at least 2 characters. So, oh, I'm surprised that V-Day is available for Valentine's Day. That's pretty interesting. I guess I jumped the gun. I guess I got to there first. Okay, so then from here, you can choose sort of that background image for your grid. So I can choose, let's say this one. If I click on nature or people, I can always choose a different image from here to sort of be that background. Or I can upload my own picture if I click on upload. But I'll just choose one of the pictures from here. So I'll choose this, looks like some jellyfish. Click next. Okay, now this brings me to the next part, where I would put in that student ID list. Because remember, what I did was I chose this as my community. I chose this as my option. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my presentation here and just show you an example of what it would look like once you put in student names. So for the student ID list, you would type in first and last name. If you only wanted to put in last initial, you certainly could do that as well. Students in this particular type of grid would not be typing in their names. The only thing they would have to type in once they access that grid, go to that site. And if you're using mobile devices, you could always print out a QR code that they could scan as well, would be another option. All students would have to type in is this identifier. So let's say that you have kindergartners and you want them to have very easy passwords. You can just, from let's say your teacher website or someplace else, have that link for them to go to. All they would have to type in is a very simple word. So perhaps ABC, cat or dog. You would just need to have a unique one for each student in that case. So each student would have their own unique identifier, which you can sort of think of as a password. The other option would be they could upload a CSV file. And then they would click next. So from here, I'm just going to put in one student name here. In Mimi J. And I'll put in the identifier of, I'll just put in bird, let's say. It has to be at least 2 characters. If you do leave it blank, they will create random ones for students as well. So again, if you don't want to type in each student's name, there is this upload a CSV option that they give you. And you can use their template, which is linked up here by clicking on the word template. So this would be something where they show you the fields that you would need. Just open that up here. And they also give you instructions along with that. So then you would just need to copy and paste in or type right here the student first name, last name, and their ID or their short password on each of these rows. So again, if you already have a student list that you could copy and paste in here, it might make it a little bit easier if you are using that option. Okay, so I'm just going to add one student for now and click next. Now, if you needed to add more students later on, you certainly could do that. So once you've already created your grid and you're back to viewing that grid, if you click on the pencil or grid actions and go back to edit the grid, that's where then you could add in more students. Let's say a new student moves into class. Also, you have the option to print a student list. So then what this does is it would print out a little card for each student. So they could then either go to FlipGrid and type in, let's say, this is your flip code, that V-Day, and then all they would have to type in after that is their password. So in this case, the student would go to flipgrid.com, or they could just scan this QR code. And if it's not already loaded, type in V-Day and then type in bird. So if I had more than one student, I would be able to print out those little cards for each student. So kind of like a little tag. I won't actually print that out now. But now I can click where it says Launch My Grid. Okay, so now from here, I can share my grid. I can choose to view it as a student. If I'm all set for now, and we will go over those options in the webinar, I can click where it says All Set. So the other options, the different kinds of grids that you can create. Another one is the school email domain option. So in this option, students would actually be authenticated by their regular username and password, either for their Google account through school or their Office 365 account through school. So it will be one of those 2 things. So let me click All Set for my grid here. Okay, so again, once I click All Set, it's going to bring me right into that grid. So if I need to go back to all of my grids, I can either click My Grids at the top of the page, or I can go back in the breadcrumbs here. So think of Hansel and Gretel. I'm kind of following the steps backward to the left, and I'll click on My Grids. Okay, so the other option, let's see if I click on New Grid and I choose School Email Domain. This would be for students who have or use Google or Office 365 accounts. Okay, so the difference here when I click Next is I would type in a school domain and then click Enter. Now, if this is something that you're using, let's say you're partnering with another school who Also, they have their own Google or Office 365 accounts. You can add in more than one domain. But then what happens is these have to be school domains for safety purposes, and users can't get into the grid unless the Google account or Office account they log in with is tied to one of those schools. Okay, so then the other option is PLC or public grid. So again, you could make a grid public so that anyone could access it. But then maybe even as adults, there might be some people who may not want everyone in the whole world to see their videos. So then in that case, you could actually choose to have a password set up. You would just have to slide this green option here, and then you would enter in your own password and choose Launch My Grid. So if I did instead choose this bottom option, PLCs and public grids, I'll choose my kitty cat and click Next. So here is where now, if I wanted to add in a password for my grid, I'm just going to click here to turn that on, and then I could enter my password here. So whatever I would want that password to be, as long as it's a minimum of 8 characters. And that will tell you when your password meets criteria, and then you would click Launch My Grid. So that's the other kind of grid that you can create. But I'm just going to close out, and I'm just going to check to see if we have any questions. Okay. So before we get started in creating topics where students would respond, we'll look at some of the grid details. So as I mentioned before, once you create your grid, you have the option to view it as a student by clicking on the button that tells you the flip code. You also from here have the option to add what are called co-pilots. So co-pilots could be co-teachers in your building. So let's say you have a co-teacher that you also want to be able to create discussion topics, moderate student responses, because you do have the option to turn this on where before other students can see the video responses, they would actually have to be approved before they could see other responses. You could add co-pilots to help moderate the grid as well. So that's what would happen if you click Add Co-Pilots. As I mentioned, if you click on the pencil or the grid actions, you have the ability to, for example, add students. So if you had the class where it's by the student IDs that you put in, that's where then you could add more students. So let me go back to my grid here. So I'm just going to click on my Valentine's Day FlipGrid title. And so here, if I wanted to add co-pilots, I'm going to click on that link. And then I could type in somebody's name here. Okay, so if I wanted to put in one of my fellow teachers' email addresses, and then I could click invite, it would invite that person then to be a co-pilot. If they haven't already, then they would use their school account to log into FlipGrid. This can also work too, as you saw with that what if FlipGrid. That's actually one where there are teachers from different areas of the country who decided to collaborate. And we'll talk more about that when we get to an area called Grid Pals. Okay, but again, if I wanted to add students, I could click Grid Actions, or I could just edit the grid. Okay, so if I click Edit, then here is where, if I chose this type of community, I could type in more student names. I could even from here change the community type too. So if I wanted to change it to where students log in with Google, or if I wanted to change it to where, again, if they're 16 or over, where they're just using a simple password, but then everybody would have the same, then I could do that too. And this is also where I can get back to print that student list of those cards, with their password and the QR code. Okay, so some other options that you have under Edit here. You can duplicate it. So let's say that you have several different classes and you want to have the same topic for each class, but have them separate so they're only seeing responses from their own class. You can choose to duplicate the grid. And then you can choose what you would like to keep in that grid. Do you just want the topic, or do you want to include any responses that may already be there? Okay. And then this is also where then I could share the grid, either with my class by a QR code or a link, or I can invite co-pilots from here as well. So if you're someone who's using Google Classroom, you can also share it there. There's a Remind you can share it on, or copy the embed code. Let's say you wanted to embed it into either a website, a page in Schoology. If you use Schoology, you have that option. Just a kind of a little note about Remind that I found out today. They are going to, because of some disputes, discontinue for now text messaging alerts from Remind to Verizon phones. So again, if you have parents or students who use Verizon phones, I would encourage them to download the actual Remind app and get their notifications that way. Which brings me to another area of a FlipGrid. If I click on Grid Actions, you can choose what kind of notifications you want to get. So if I click Grid Notifications, and I like to receive this, you can choose to get a notification whenever a student adds a new video. And you can also choose to get a daily or weekly digest of all the new topics and videos. Okay, and of course from here as well, under the actions, if you needed to delete this grid, you could do that as well. Okay, let me just check again for some questions. Okay. Okay, so once you have your grid created, you're going to create your first topic. So they do give you some default topics to start with, just to kind of show you how FlipGrid works. But when you're ready to use this with your class, you can click on the blue New Topic button, and then it gives you a number of different options that you can choose from. Again, a lot of these used to be paid features, but now, like I said, all of the features, even the premium ones, you can customize for free. So in the first section of your topic, you have to give it a title and a description. So those are the required elements. If you want to, you can choose a video response time. So the default is 1.5 minutes. But if you wanted to make sure students were very succinct and you wanted to limit the time, you could certainly, let's say even say 30 seconds or 15 seconds max for their video. Or if you wanted to give them more time for a longer video, for example, let's say it was a book talk or a book report, you could even make that a longer time frame. And you can choose also a topic display date, which would be a start date. So let's say you didn't want students to see this until a later date. Once you get to a topic, you could set it for a date in the future. And you could also give students some further instructions if you would like to. Okay, so I'm going to go into FlipGrid. I'm in my Valentine's Day FlipGrid. So you can see that they give you some different grids. Some different topics to start with. So for example, this welcome one has the code. So in addition to the grid itself having its own code, each topic would also have its own unique code. And then students would just need to enter in their code. So in this example, I'm going to put in bird and type that in. And then students would be into that topic. Okay. And so also you have the ability here to make a topic active, inactive, or frozen. So frozen means that perhaps it's a topic that has been active, but you just want to make it so that no one can respond any longer, but students can still access it to view any videos that have been approved. And of course, inactive means then you can still see it, but students would not be able to. Okay, so I'm going to click on the blue button for new topic. Okay, and then in here, I'll say, for example, what is love? Okay, and then here is where then I could choose my video response time. So if I choose 15 seconds, it's going to be limited to that amount of time. If I give them up to 5 minutes, they could take that long. They don't necessarily have to take that long though. So this is kind of a time limit, let's say. So let's say in here, I want them to describe that in 1 minute. Now let's say I want this topic to be displayed, let's say February 11th. So then if I did that, actually students, they wouldn't see it until that date. So I'm just going to keep it for our testing purposes to today's date. And then in here, you would put in a description. So for example, what does love mean to you? Please explain and give some examples. Okay, so some other tools you have in here, and you can actually write up to 500 characters. So this would be the question that you would be asking students to respond to. So you have just some basic formatting, but also if you wanted to, you could insert a link. So let's say that you wanted them to visit a link and then respond to the content of that web page. You could put a link in. If you had some text that you had copied and pasted, you may need to clear formatting, or if you made something bold or italic and you wanted to clear that formatting, you could do that here as well. And then the topic tip. If you wanted to give them some extra help, you could do that as well. Okay, so the next area of the topic details, you can choose whether you want to have video moderation turned on. So if you slide this to the right so that it turns green, a teacher or co-pilot would have to approve the video, would have to make it active before other students could see it. Okay, and then in section 3 is another place where you could choose to make that video active, inactive, or frozen, or you could choose a freeze date. So you could say, for example, all students must have their videos recorded by such and such a date if it was for an assignment. Okay. So I'm going to scroll down. So again, if I want to turn on video moderation, I'm going to click this to slide over, choose my state, and then if I want to make sure all students respond by, let's say February 15th, I can make that scheduled. So now it's just going to be scheduled as active during this time. And then afterwards, the status would be frozen so that students could view it, but they couldn't do any late submissions. Okay, so then under the section 4 here is where you can continue to add maybe some hooks or some resources for the topic you are asking students to respond to. Okay, so in the topic details, section 4 and 5, this is where, so for example, in the snow day one, the teacher had attached that video of a principal, singing Mariah Carey about a snow day. You could add those kinds of things, or something fun and engaging for students. So putting in a video, an image, you can choose an emoji. If it's content you already have in a Google Doc or Office 365 document or something in OneNote, you could also choose that. And then in section 6, it lets you choose what students are allowed to do within the grid. So the different features that when students are recording or when they're responding, the options that they would have. Okay, so now in this section here, I can do a topic resource. So again, I could record my own video. I could upload a video that I already have on my computer. I could add in a video from YouTube. So I would have to actually copy and paste in that YouTube video. So if I wanted to paste in, one of my former webinars, I could just find that link, and then I could paste that in. So let's say I go back to YouTube here. Okay, I'm just going to click on one of these here. Let's see, what journey around Earth? Let's just say, type in, I'll just go to one of my recent things here. So Apollo 11, so it would just work this way where you can click the YouTube video link from the top of the page, if that's the video that you're going to use, and then you can paste it in and click next. And then it's going to bring that in. So if a student, really loves outer space exploration, or if that's something that you love, and this is what you're saying to students, you could find a similar topic, then you could add that. Or I could choose to find another video. And then that would become a part of the topic or the question that you're asking students. So again, you could upload an image. You could add something from Giphy. So again, if you go to Giphy.com, this is something that may or may not be blocked in your school. If it's not, it just gives kind of some fun GIFs that you could use, So here we go. Here's a little bird getting brushed. So love is, caring for your pets, let's say. Then in that case, I could click on the link here. And then I could get the link for my Giphy. Okay, so I'm going to copy the link. Just copy that shortened link. And I could paste it in here and click next. Oh, I can't use the short one. I have to do the entire link. So I'm actually going to copy this link and paste that in here. Okay, so then my topic will include this little picture of a birdie getting brushed with a toothbrush. My favorite ones are hamsters getting brushed with a toothbrush, but this is still very cute. And again, this is where if you wanted to attach a link to a Google Doc, something from YouTube or Dropbox, something from OneNote, you could attach that here. And then here in section 6, you choose what you want students to be able to do. So for example, should students be able to put on stickers and drawings? And so this is when students record a video, they also have to take what's called a selfie for, their grid before a student clicks on to watch the video. So students are going to take their picture, and if you want them to be able to decorate it, like perhaps in that what if grid, you saw some examples of that. So some students who put like pixelated sunglasses or silly hats on their face. If you want students to be able to just use stickers, do you want them to be able to draw their own things on the screen? Again, it depends on your students, what you think would be appropriate for them. I'll just keep this one to stickers and drawings for now. Can students react with a mic drop emoji? So that's FlipGrid's version of a like. So there's no such thing as a dislike in FlipGrid. So you can't really thumbs down something. But if you're afraid they might start to, compete and say, oh, I have more likes than you do, I have more mic drops. If that you think would be an issue, you can always choose to turn that feature off as well. And then you can choose whether students can see how many times their video has been viewed. So same kind of a thing. If you're afraid it's going to cause an issue with competing over the number of views, You can certainly turn that feature off as well. If you want to allow students to add a video title, sometimes it might actually be a good practice because they have to think about then summarizing their video. Okay. And the last section is for feedback. So we'll talk about that. Okay, so in the last section, you can either choose their basic feedback, which then would give you sort of a brief rubric of the two areas, performance and ideas. But if you wanted to assess students on more than performance and ideas, let's say there's particular content that you're also assessing them on here, other skills, then you can certainly click where it says custom feedback and you can add in your own criteria. So by default, it's going to be the basic feedback with performance and ideas. If I click custom, this is where then I would create my own custom rubric with my own criteria. But I'll keep this at basic and I'm going to create the topic. Okay, so again, as I mentioned, students could get to the topic by clicking on your grid's main address here, or they could go right to this particular link. So if you use Google Classroom or however you would share links with students on a teacher website, Schoology, OneNote, whatever it might be, this link would link right to that topic itself. Okay, so then when students get in there, they would type in their either password for student ID or log in with their Microsoft or Google account and click Let's Go. All right, so now as a student, this is what they would see. So if I have my little Giphy here and I have my question. A nice feature too, they have an immersive reader. So if students need it spoken to them, they have that, or if they need to have more accessibility features, then they have those options as well.
What is love? What does love mean to you?
Okay, and there are some other text preferences for students who maybe have a hard time with screens, who maybe needed that inverted. You can have it outline parts of speech. And these are all features actually that are built into Microsoft OneNote as well. So another great feature, reason why it's nice that Microsoft is now a partner of FlipGrid, so to speak. Okay. So student responses. So again, we talked about ways that you could share the topic with students. But also, what's nice is if you wanted parents, for example, or let's say a community expert to be part of the grid as well, there is what's called a guest mode now. So again, if I go back to my grid here and I click on Share Topic, I would click where it says Add Topic Guests. And if I choose Guest Mode, here is a guest code that they would have to type in. And you can choose whether or not the guest is allowed to record or just view, depending on who the guest is or what the purpose is. Okay. So now looking at that from a student perspective, once students access and log into the topic, they're going to see this icon here. So it's going to be a green circle with a plus. And then that allows them to record their own video. Some nice features they have here too. They can use keyboard shortcuts R and P to record or pause. Let's say they need to stop for a second. Or they can use the buttons that are on the screen as well. So for example, using the big reddish pink button to record, they can use that as well. And they can also choose by clicking on the yellow icon to add some sticky notes. So if students don't already have something written out on a paper, or they don't feel like looking down at a paper while they're trying to record a video and look into their camera, they can actually have a little sticky note right on the screen itself. Okay, so now I'm going to go in here as Mimi, click here to record my video. And it says moderated because, again, I set up this topic to be where teachers have to moderate the video before other students can see it. So I'm going to click here. Okay, and again, I could click on the R or P to record and pause, or I could click right here. So again, if I wanted that sticky note, I could click in the lower right here where it says sticky, and then I could type in my notes. So to me, love is, and then students could type in their notes here. So again, even if they had something on a paper, they're not looking down at that paper. They are actually still looking at the screen where their sticky note is. So now I'm going to record, and it gives them a countdown, and they would speak. To me, love is, go through their discussion response. And they can also see on here, and they can click pause to pause it. They can see how much time they have left. So how much time, so for example here, I gave them a minute. It shows about a quarter of that done. So that's saying maybe they've spoken for 15 seconds. So when they're getting close to the end time, it's going to give them that idea of they need to sort of speed that up. So again, if they feel like they didn't pace that correctly, they have the option to click in the lower left corner where it says redo. It's a little trash can icon. So if they click there, then they can re-record their video. But right now I'm going to click next down, and they would speak. To me, love is, go through their discussion response. And they can also see on here, and they can click pause to pause it down, and they would speak. To me, love is, go through their okay, so I'm going to click next response. But some other options that they have before I snap my selfie. Let me get back to here. In the next steps, again, they can re-record by clicking on the redo button. Otherwise, they're going to click next. If they wanted to put a title on their video, they could do that by clicking on the T here. If they needed to add more, they can click on, now on this step, it's going to show their time instead of being a record button. They can make an attachment as well. Okay, and then in the next step, they would snap a selfie, which would be the first thing that people see on the main topic page before they would click to view the video. Okay, so now I'm going to snap a selfie. Okay, so then once I do that, here is where then they can choose some different what are called stickers. So these on the side here are some stickers. So let's say I love art. I can click on that, and then I can sort of resize or move it if I need to. I can click on the trash can if I decide I don't want that. On the bottom here are different categories. So if I wanted to choose accessories, I can choose that. Let's say I want this little bow, and then I can resize it if I need to. Need to kind of turn that, this little button at the top. I can put it on like this, or I could kind of draw my own things too using the drawing tools on the side. So again, when you set up the topic, as we saw in the topic options, you can choose whether or not you allow students to do drawings or stickers or both. Okay, if they wanted to undo their drawing, they could click here if they're on the drawing tools. Otherwise, then they can click submit. Okay, and it will give them a screen like this. Okay, so for example, this says the topic is moderated and your video will be visible when it's approved. But students, they're allowed to download their own video. So if they wanted to save a copy of it right now, just in case they're afraid something is going to happen, somehow they think their video is going to get lost, they can always download it from here as well. Okay, so now back in as the teacher, if I go into the grid, here's where now I can moderate that post. Okay, so I submitted my video, put on my stickers on my selfie. And so students would see the screen that says it's moderated. They would click complete. Click complete here. Okay. All right. Now, if there were other student responses that had been approved, they would show up as icons here. But now as the teacher, I'm going to go in and I can preview the video, and then if it's acceptable, I can change it from inactive to active. So now as a teacher, I can see the student's selfie here. I'm going to click on Mimi J.
Down, and they would speak to me. Love is.
Okay. Now from here, and we will talk about giving students feedback. I could give them feedback as well. But first what I'll do is, if I approve this video and I want other students to be able to see it, I can now switch it from inactive, which is red, to active. Okay. So now from the student view, they would be able to see those
Down,
videos.
and they would speak to me. Love is. Go through.
Okay. And the video is kind of lagging here because I'm making a recording and then a recording within a recording. But normally it wouldn't be it would just be a slight delay, probably depending on their device when students are recording their video. Okay. So student interactions, what students are able to do when they click on another's video, they're able to click on the green button to reply to another student's video. They can click on the little shout out here, or the mic drop, I guess it is. That's kind of like their version of a like. If students do reply to another student, they also reply with video, which then you would need to moderate. And it's going to show up like this with a little green arrow. So as a student,
Down,
they click
and they would
here,
speak.
and then they give a reply. This is another video reply. And I won't add much to it. I'll just kind of go through this way and submit.
Down.
So then what happens is then, let me just refresh on the screen here. Okay, so when the student replies to another, you're going to see it like this. It's going to be, instead of a main one, look like a little offshoot with an arrow. And then in order for other students to see that reply, I would have to click active. And then students would see it when they went to this video.
And they would speak to me.
They would see
Another
the
video
two
reply.
video replies here, or if there were more replies than one, they would see them all in sort of a list here. Okay. Okay, so again, to evaluate student work, you can click on the student's video.
Down.
And here are the options you have. You can choose a level from the grading rubric. If you set up a custom rubric, it would have your own criteria here. You can leave comments, and then you could either send a feedback link, or if students have an email address, then you could email that to students. So this option would only work really if students had signed in with their Google or Office 365 accounts. You could also choose to edit. Here you can choose display name, or you could enter in a student email address. And then here are some other options that I'll just sort of talk about. Certainly you could download the student's video if you are afraid that maybe there's a point where you won't have internet and you wanted to share it. But some other options that you have here, I'll just look at those here. You can create what are called mixtapes. So for example, if there are certain students in different classes who have similar videos on a similar topic, you can create a new topic from those different videos, sort of a collection. So think about mixtapes. For those who may remember making mixtapes, I know that I did back in the 80s and 90s. It's kind of a collection of songs that you like, or let's say, you know, love songs. So you would go and record from the radio those songs that you really like, and they're from different albums and artists. A mixtape is something similar to that. So if I go into here as a teacher, if I want to add it to a mixtape, and the Spark response here, you can create a whole new topic from a student response. So if you want the student's video to now be part of a new topic that all students will see, and respond to it, you can do that. The star features the response. So then when students go to that response page, it features toward the top. Let's say if there are a lot of responses, features that student response. But the mixtape option, for example, allows you to add it to an existing mixtape, or if you don't have one already, it will ask you to create a new mixtape. Now, the mixtape codes always have to have a plus in front of them. So let me go back to mixtapes here. So you can also access mixtapes from any page in FlipGrid by clicking on mixtapes at the top of the screen. So now in here, notice this flip code has a plus in the front. So if I click on new mixtape, the same kind of thing, you can make a custom flip code, but it would have to have a plus in front of it. That signifies that this is a mixtape. So again, it's taking student responses maybe from different topics and combining those into one. Okay, and I know we're running somewhat short on time. I do want to show you how you can take the quiz and submit that. But to do so, you will need a secret code, which actually brings me to my last topic, which is called Grid Pals. So Grid Pals, it's sort of like a FlipGrid pen pal. So it's where students, teachers can partner with a classroom someplace else in the country or world. And you would then, if you decide to partner with them, you can contact them via social media that you would have to enter to make yourself active. You can communicate with that teacher and then make each other, let's say, co-pilots in your grids. And so then students would have that interaction with students maybe overseas or at another school. So to do the Grid Pals here, again, if you wanted your profile to be active, you would need to click here on active, put in a little information about yourself, possibly a photo. So again, this is then allowing other teachers to find you and possibly partner up. And they would contact you by social media, whatever social media platforms you have, you would type in here. But if you're just kind of seeing who's out there right now, you could stay hidden, and then you could zoom in or out and click on any of these pluses or kind of mouse over them to find out about someone else's class. So again, you could find someone of a similar subject or grade level someplace else in the country and choose to contact them and see if they want to be a grid pal with your class. So that brings us to the end of the webinar. So again, I'm going to see if there are questions during the live session. So I don't see any there. So let me show you where you would access the discussion in our online course platform, and also how you would receive credit for the webinar. Okay, so from here, so far you've been in the webinar video. Once you submit at least one attempt for the quiz, you'll also have access to the presentation that we used today. If I click on FlipGrid questions, this is where then, after I end the webinar in a couple of minutes, this is where you would actually click on start a new thread to ask me a question. And I try to get back to people within a day or so to answer their questions, because I will get a notification up here when someone posts a question. Okay, so the quiz itself. So you need to, in order to receive the credit, the certificate, you need to receive an 80% or higher, but you can take this as many times as you need to. Once you take it once, you will have also access to the presentation to review, also the educator's guide that's linked here. But in order to submit the quiz, you would actually need to put in a secret code word, which I just mentioned not too long ago. And that phrase would be grid pals. So all lowercase, no hashtag. Let me just zoom in here a little bit. Okay. So the password would be no spaces, all lowercase, no hashtag, just put in grid pals. Okay, so that would be the secret code that you would need. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna click back on the content here. And so once you have successfully completed the quiz, so if you get an 80% or higher, and it's only a 5 question quiz. So again, if you get 4 out of 5 or all the questions, all 5 right, you can then go to the news area, click on news at the top of the platform, and then you'll have a certificate here. So for each of the webinars, then you would see your certificate. Once you meet that condition, that would show up for you. So again, I can click here to view it. As a student, you would have the ability from there then to print out your certificate as well. But if you have any questions about that, please feel free to contact me. Let me just go back to the first slide here. So my email address is mkovac@e1b.org. So you can certainly contact me there, or you can contact me through the discussions in our webinar platform. And the same thing goes for the Kaizena webinar. So if you haven't viewed that one yet, it would be the same process for that. So I hope that you have enjoyed taking a look into FlipGrid. Again, it's something that can be as simple as possible or as complicated as you would like it to be. I just would encourage you to get in there, try a simple topic with students. As always, if you need help, send me an email or post to the discussion. And I look forward to seeing you in future webinars. Thanks and have a great night or day.